Do we hit it at the same time?
Yep, it's on.
Hello, Dr. T.
How you doing, Dr. Liz?
Oh my God, here we are. For those of you tuning in, this has been 3 or 4 years. No, not years, months in the making. This has been a passion project for Dr. T and I. We've both had some pretty challenging mental health adventures over the years, not just in regards to our climbing into different forms of leadership, but just as people. And we created this podcast to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to turn it over to you, T, and you can talk a little bit about why this matters to you, who you are, and then I'll take it back and kind of interview you a little bit about your personal story.
Okay. Well, this is kind of at the forefront for me just because I have had struggles myself with mental health, and in business and in leadership roles that can directly affect how you show up and how you are, and it has a lot of effect on your life, your personal life, especially if it's going, like, if you have certain traumas going completely unaddressed. So I wanted to be a part of this conversation just so everyone does kind of get like a better understanding, like, hey, there are people dealing with this is how, kind of negate the stigmas, because I know there's a lot of negative stigmas around it and about being open and openly speaking about it. So I definitely wanted to get involved with the project just to kind of like push that message out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's just a lot of spaces where we talk about mental health and it gets watered into wellness and work life balance. And those things are fine, but they're not actually like touching the surface, even on like acute mental health challenges when we're talking about mental health illnesses, diagnoses. Um, each of us have different diagnoses. I'm very open with mine. There's lots of different comfort levels for people in areas of leadership where they say, this is something I really feel like I have to hide, or this is something where I feel like I can be an advocate and be open about. And there's spaces for people all over the place in terms of their comfort level. But in terms of like, there's actually a space where people are talking about this in really explicit ways where it's not watered down and whitewashed and turned into something that's like hashtag blessed. And I've come through all these challenges. Like, that doesn't exist yet. And
Right.
so here we are. We're making it. So I'm gonna give a little disclaimer here, real quick. So both of us are doctors in our own right. I have a PhD, and on top of that, I have a coaching certification in divorce coaching. My focus in my PhD in conflict analysis and resolution was on trauma and leadership. So very squarely fit within the realm of what we're going to be talking about, but I'm not a medical doctor. And I'm going to hand it to you, T, and you can talk a little bit about your credentials and positioning yourself as a not medical provider, but someone that does fit within this space.
Yes. So I have a background in finance, actually. So that's what my MBA is in. And in 2023, I was also awarded an honorary doctoral in humanitarianism, which is not the same as a PhD, and it has nothing to do with academia. So I do want to make that clear. But yes, so that's kind of what my background is in, finance. And that's a real black and white type of field. And I want to talk a little bit more about that experience in mental health when we get deeper into it.
Okay, great. Well, those disclaimers on the table. I'll give like one more quick thing. The conversations here are not intended for any diagnostics. We're not here to tell you to go on meds or go off meds or seek counseling or discontinue counseling. These are our personal experiences. And as we bring on guests, we'll be talking about their experiences as well. So we can draw from our backgrounds professionally, but none of what we're about to talk about is to say you personally should go take any particular action. So with all of that out of the way, T, tell us a little bit about where you're at today and how your mental health adventures played into creating the leader that you are now.
Woo! Okay. Well, today, I am in a much better place than I have been in the past. I'm seeking outside counsel because I do want to say I'm not telling anybody to go do that, but it has helped me significantly going through therapy to address certain things. And my first therapy experience was in the military. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
say it was by force. They kind of forced me into therapy. I didn't think I had anything wrong with me. I didn't think there was any problems or anything like that. So that was a pivotal moment in my life because it was very eye opening, to see like, whoa, I didn't realize that these unaddressed problems can cause such friction and discord in my life. And so, but today I'm going through therapy. I have my own personal hobbies. I'm still running my business full time, and I will say again, stressing the importance of finding a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist or whatever it is, because if you if you have, for me at least from my experience, if you have things that are just unaddressed or you haven't come to terms with, you haven't addressed at all, it's going to show up in how you lead. It's going to show up in how you
Mhm.
conduct your business. It's going to show up in your interpersonal relationships. It's going to show up in the workplace. That has been true for me. I don't know, has that been true for you?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a little bit about it. And from the past experience, that's a whole nother ball game. So, but how about you, Dr. Liz? How has your experience been like today? How are you right now? Like, where are you at?
Okay, so right now I'm happier and more sturdy, steady in my life than I ever have. I got married 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago today.
Congratulations.
And I'm just like really marinating in like not what an accomplishment that is, but like what a like evolution it's been since the time that I had a really, really, really significant depressive episode. So I was
Mhm,
diagnosed bipolar 1 in
mhm.
December 2004, so 21 years ago. And yeah, so this coming December will be 22 years. And when I was diagnosed, it made so much sense to me. I had like been operating under the idea that that was probably what was going on, and I had been actively seeking medical care. But I don't know if things are like better or worse now. But when I was having those like initial like significant challenges, it was in high school, and I had a lot of mood issues, and it got chalked up to kind of being a teenager. And
Mm,
I have young people in my life now who are teenagers, and their mental health challenges are being addressed really, really differently. They're being seen as acute psychiatric challenges, and there's some negative consequences of that, but there's also a lot of positive consequences because they're getting in front of doctors. And I had a lot of teachers that were very invested in me, and that was a blessing. And I'm aware of the fact that that's not the case for every kid. And I really needed to see a doctor. I really needed somebody to sit me down and be like, okay, what's going on, and how do we help? How do we treat this? And so I started seeking counseling when I was an undergrad. I was at American University. I am going to call them out. They've continued to do a terrible job with mental health. I was an adjunct there after I graduated with my PhD,
wow.
and have seen that over the course of 20 years they continue to be horrible. And I went to the counseling center because that was what I thought you should do.
Mhm.
And I said I want to kill myself, and they said, "Well, tell us about your relationship with your parents." And I was like, "Motherfuckers!" What are you talking about? Right. And I
Yeah.
remember like I lived in Washington, D.C. I was in college there. And I remember on Wisconsin Avenue, there's like the Psychiatric Institute of Washington, is what I think it's called. And I walked in the doors of it. This is me. I was like a junior in college. And I walked in the doors and I said, I want to kill myself and I don't know what to do. And they
Mhm.
said, well, what insurance do you have? And I walked back out because I was like 20 years old, and I didn't know how to answer that question, right? And as a 42-year-old, I can answer that question pretty easily. But as a 20-year-old, I had no idea, right? And so now I hope we're at a different place when someone can articulate, hey, I'm really, really, really in trouble. We're able to respond with, let us jump in and help you. Because the experience that I had was really overwhelming, really scary. And I didn't have resources. When I
Mhm.
did get diagnosed, it was a result of a professor stepping in, who's still a mentor in my life, stepped in and was just like, this is not you. What the fuck is going on? And I went and got in front of a doctor and was diagnosed in the span of like 20 minutes. And it just made sense. I had kind of like I kind of knew that was what was going on just based on what was like what I was experiencing. Um, but having a diagnosis and then having medication changed everything in my life.
Mm.
And I've become kind of prejudiced when I hear people say, "Oh, I have bipolar and I don't use medication." I'm like, "Woo." So I just like want to acknowledge like has become like a bias on my part where I'm just like,
Yeah.
good fucking luck. Because I'm one of those people that even with medication, and I'm so like, I'm hashtag blessed. I'm so lucky to have like a cocktail and a doctor that work really well for me. And I know that's not the case for everyone. I've been really, really lucky with that. And unlucky. I've had some misadventures with other doctors, but um, by and large, I've been really stable. And that's a result of like good doctors, good medication, and me advocating for myself. Like I can tell you, like, hey, I think I'm cycling. Hey, I think this is what is going on. And so for me and a lot of other people with acute bipolar 1, we cycle. Like even on medication, we can have mood swings. They're far less significant, but still happens. And so for me, having like a network of people, not just in my personal life, but in my professional life, who can reflect back to me like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, has been a huge part of my well-being.
Mm.
And I'm in recovery too. I just celebrated 19 years dry from no alcohol, September
Yeah.
6th, and August 1st was 4 years
Wow.
clean from
19
marijuana,
years.
which I was using to address anxiety. And if that's something you're doing and it's working for you, great. It made me very depressed to the point that I had to seek significant mental health care.
Mhm.
Um, but now I have people in my life, especially my husband, who's also in recovery, who will say, like, hey, like you're overly invested in this thing, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And it's hurting you. And I think that like surrounding myself with a council of good people in my personal life and professional life has like really been the thing that's made it possible for me to ascend to where I am in my career. I'm really proud of my business. I just had like a really significant year. I beat my income goal. I'm just like feeling so good, but that is tempered with like an acute awareness of like, am I too good? Am I way up? Or am I just kind of like
Right.
riding the roller coaster of life? Um, so yeah, I hope that made sense. Part
Make
of the reason I
complete.
wanted to do this podcast was when I was really, really sick and I had a depressive episode. This was 4 years ago.
Mhm.
I when I used marijuana to deal with anxiety, I ended up swinging into a really just like dangerous mood place.
Mhm.
Um, and that experience, like one of the things that helped me through was was looking up famous people that had also like had really significant challenges with bipolar 1. And I'd be like, if Catherine Zeta-Jones can do this, so can I, right? If Selena Gomez can get through this, so can I, right? And so one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was to say to other business owners, like, hey, like you can do this. Like if you are struggling with something really significant, something that is debilitating, something that's making you want to end your life, you can move through that and come out on the other side, right? You can take care of yourself and still have a business. So anyway, that was a lot of rambling, but hopefully there was some good stuff in there.
A
Uh,
lot of good stuff in there. And I want to thank you for being so just open and honest and transparent. And I do want to apologize that you did have to experience that, because going in and telling somebody significant, like, I'm ready to take my life, and then they're like, hey, what's your insurance? It's
oh,
just like
bonkers.
a lack of care. Like, and I can go on a rant just about that, but I'm
Yeah,
glad that you were able to get diagnosed, because I feel like that's probably the start of where you were able to kind of turn things around. And it's like, okay, hey, it's not me. There's this, and this is what I can do to help and alleviate this problem. And
yep,
you can really have a different outlook and perspective on life with that.
100%, 100%. So you said you could go on a whole rant with that. So could I, right? We could be here for like the next 7 hours. So now that we've kind of like talked a little bit about like our own personal stuff, I'm curious, in this space of like talking about mental health and leadership and entrepreneurship and nonprofit leadership, like leadership in a lot of different ways, like
Mhm.
in the context of discussions around mental health, overlapping with discussions of leadership, like what really fucking pisses you off? Like what do you feel like is getting like garbled, or like what's getting wrong when people talk about this?
Two things, and you mentioned it. When you went to go and seek help, help was not there.
Mhm.
And so I've had that experience. I've even had the experience at my last role as an audit manager. I was pretty transparent with, appointments and stuff like that. But then when it came time like to it and me actually needing help, it kind of just was like, this is too much. Like you're too much. And
Yep.
at the same time, it kind of was like I was put in a place where it was like, well, you didn't admit to having any disorders or anything wrong with you, which you don't have to. And then it was also in the same breath I was getting kind of penalized for going to, counseling and things of that sort to make myself better. So it's kind of just like it's like a double-edged sword almost, because it's like you
Mhm.
you ask for the help, you don't necessarily get the help, or you ask for the help, people are aware, and then there's a stigma to it because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, something's wrong with you, and we didn't really want you on the team anyways because you came with all these problems.
Yep.
So that's probably that's the biggest. And then obviously suicide, I take suicide pretty seriously. I have five brothers that I've known personally, and three of them lost their battle to suicide.
Mm.
And so it like only there was one, he had a freak accident, and then another one, he had an accident in training, but literally three brothers took their lives because of suicide. And so I think that right now it kind of almost feels like, people they don't take it seriously because they can't physically see it.
Mhm.
If your legs blown off, people know you went to combat, they can understand PTSD in that sense. They can be like, "Oh, okay, I get it. You have no legs, you went to Iraq. I get that." But when
Yeah.
it's like when they cannot see it, if they can't physically see something wrong with you, they think that, well, everything's good, nothing's there. And I think that's kind of where we've got to navigate the territory right now, because it's kind of like just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It exists. People are killing
Yeah.
themselves in large numbers. And so yeah, those were the two biggest things for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanna kinda, like, pull out what you said there with, like, you were told that you had to disclose, but then penalized when you disclosed. I think, like, first and foremost, like, one, if you're listening to this and you are struggling with a mental health illness, like, go look up the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have a lot of rights and protections that are available to you. You are in a position where you have confidentiality in most cases. Like, this is I'm not a lawyer, right? But go look up Americans with Disabilities Act. You are protected. You have lots of different rights. You are not under an obligation to disclose to anyone any more so than if you had a heart condition or IBS. Like, this is something that affects your life, but it's not anybody else's business unless you choose to make it so. So that high horse. I think like the thing that pisses me off that you're like articulating is that like this is still seen as a personal decision. Like, well, you're crazy because like there's some sort of failing on your part and like you've not like done enough to overcome it. When I think about like people on dialysis or people, struggling with cancer and all these different things, like no one comes up to them and is like, "Well, did you try like meditating?" Right? It's like, well, my friend tried these supplements and they really, right? Actually, I see that in the cancer world, so I don't want to, I don't want to say that that doesn't exist, right? But what I find like so frustrating that you're talking about, T, is that there's this element of personal responsibility that gets assigned to it, where it's like, well, you didn't do enough to make sure that you didn't feel this way. And it's like, well, maybe my brain works this way and you're short and, your genetics made you short and I'm this way and my genetics made me that way, right? And like I can look up the lineage in my family and be like, oh yeah, right?
Mhm.
Like I come by this real honestly. And I think that right now, like if I had one like wish for 2026, it is that we're able as a community of leaders, right? People that can come together around like concepts of high performance, people that own businesses, people that are leading nonprofits, and we can say, hey, there's space to have support for people struggling with this, the same as if somebody was in a
And
wheelchair and
really
we
mean it.
install the
And
ramp. Like
really
there are
mean it.
different supports that we need to have in place, and that doesn't mean that someone's broken, and it doesn't mean that someone didn't try hard enough, right? It means that this is just biology and this is how it works. um yeah, I mean, it makes me so angry, especially I think the military, honestly, or I should say the veteran community, is doing a better job than most spaces in talking about suicide, right? They're very open about the fact that on average 22 vets kill themselves every day. My husband's a veteran. um and which is not to say he's like struggling with any of this, just to say like this is a community that I get to see a little bit from the outside, and to see them be open and inclusive about these conversations and
Yeah.
wanting to have things be different, I think
Mhm.
is really different than most other communities where it's let's just be quiet about this,
Yes.
something to be ashamed about, it's something
Yes.
to feel like this is like a dirty little secret. um
And
you know
I want to chime in on that piece
yeah.
because I will say the DoD and the military, they have a very progressive initiative. So they're always looking to, be forward thinking and stuff like that. And so I think they know and they understand that this is something that's affecting, the troops, the soldiers, the Marines, it's affecting everybody. And so with that awareness, they implement things to, hey, this is how we can overcome. And now, still, even though there's still some losing their battle and stuff like that, the talk, like I will say I first learned about mental health and all of that through the military.
Mhm.
Like my first understanding of what any of this stuff was through the military. I wouldn't have had a very good understanding of it otherwise. And so I definitely just want to chime in and agree with you with that because they do a very good job with that. And in the in the regular world and even in corporate, I feel like again it's stigmatized because it's kind of just
Mhm.
like it's more of a check in a box. Like, hey, we want to say we did this, and so
Yep.
here's the resources. But when you do come and tell us, hey, don't really tell us, like
Yeah,
you
yeah, we
know,
we would prefer not to know, thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because like, you're a Marine, right? You were in the
Mhm.
US Marine Corps, and I taught university. I taught at 3 different universities, 2 of which are extremely prestigious private schools. Um, and across the board, all of them, despite being like liberal, progressive, inclusive, like DEI, like the banner of DEI, like emblem, poster child, all of them were really shitty about mental health, like every single one. And like the public school was far more like significantly like intentional, I think. Like, no, I want to say this differently.
Okay.
The state school had resources and implemented them swiftly. The private school where I had a student who was in crisis, it
Mhm.
was such a like hullabaloo and jumping through bureaucratic nonsense hoops to try to get this kid into any sort of resources was really,
Mhm.
really difficult. And so for me, like now the wife of a veteran who sees this kind of community attending to these issues in ways that are really actionable is
Mhm.
so frustrating to then see such a difference in the sphere of like universities where it's like, well,
Mhm.
ostensibly these places say they're better at this, right? They say that
Right.
this is like really something that's an initiative and it's okay to not be okay. But when it comes to actionable tools, like there's very little out there.
Right.
So anyway, if you're a veteran or in a, leadership in the veteran community, good job. Keep it up.
Yes, I definitely agree. And especially I love the work that a lot of our veterans come out and do, especially in regards to mental health. And I think a lot of it too is personal. It's very personal, because I will say, when I look at my civilian friends and I look at my veteran friends, the number is much larger in the veteran community of committing suicide. From just, I don't know that in terms of statistics, but in terms of my experience, I don't think I've had any, friends in my civilian life that has lost their battle in suicide. But so, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I know for me, like I've been um, suicidal wanting to end my life once, and suicidal not wanting to die, but concerned that I might try because I was just in like such a
Ideation.
mixed state. I was crazy enough, like I don't like that word. I was manic enough that I thought I might do something. I had no impulse control, and I
Hmm.
was depressed enough that I didn't want to be alive anymore. Um, but I was pregnant. I was 27 weeks pregnant. I didn't want to kill my son. Like I hope that goes without saying. And so in that moment, right, I had to get real, like actionable, tangible resources beyond like it's okay to not be okay. And I'm grateful for resources that exist, like doctors, like hospitals, where you can go and have like hands-on care to support you through a situation like that. And then the second time I was suicidal, I did want to end my life. It was not a, oh my gosh, I have a lack of impulse control, I'm afraid I might do this. It was a like, I actively want to no longer be alive. And but for my son, I would have followed through on that. I didn't want to leave my kid without a mom. And so I took action and I got care. And in both of those circumstances, I was so well taken care of. I was so attended to with a lot of love. But
Hmm.
even in a space of good intention, there was so much like nonsense that went with that and like
Yeah.
misinformation. I had a nurse pat me on the leg, like in a loving way. She was like supporting me and she patted me on the leg and she said, "Well, when you accept Jesus as your savior, you won't feel this way anymore." And I was like, "What is happening?"
Okay.
Like what is, I mean, maybe, I don't know, I haven't tried that, so maybe it would have helped, but it was such a like bizarre statement to come from a medical provider. And so I hold that up
Yeah.
just to say, like, even though there are spaces that are very attentive to people's needs in moments of crises, there's still a lot of like quackery in that
Yeah.
space. And
Yeah.
even like being prescribed something when you're in an acute situation and you need to have medical attention given to you. um you don't often have someone there, a friend or a family member there to be an advocate to say like, hey, let's look up the side effects, but and kind of like really think about this. And there's been two times where I was prescribed something that I had significant reactions to, that resulted in ambulance rides, like really, really, really bad stuff. And so like there's so much trial and error, there's so much stigma that makes it difficult to talk about the fact that you're dealing with trial and error with medications. All of this stuff exists within like this nasty soup of we're still not willing to talk about this really explicitly.
And all that you said, it reminded me of one of my own experiences. My first time that I also had suicide ideations, and I was active duty, and I didn't want to come out and say it, just because it's
Right.
kind of like, mission first, you're on go, 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 go. And so it just got to a point where I kept trying and kept being on go, and I literally just started to go into breakdown. Like
Hmm.
it was like I just couldn't take it. So physical reactions were starting to happen. Like my face was like breaking out. I remember I looked like I had hives all over my face. Like all kinds of crazy stuff was happening. And so I finally came out, and I was trying to like keep it secret. Like I told the corpsman, I was like, hey, I'm feeling like this, and I'm scared. Like I didn't want to come out and say it, but I was like, it was getting to a point where I was visualizing. And I
Yeah.
remember I went to the hospital one time, and they turned me away. They were like, yeah, you're fine. Go change your socks.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, if I go back to the car, like,
It's a
there's a
one-way trip,
plan.
bitches.
Yeah, like there's a plan in place. And so I got past and I got to that day, and that was my first like psychiatric visit. And it was it was that was kind of the turning point
Mm-hmm.
for me, because again, I didn't have an awareness of any of my issues, or, none of it. I just was living. And so I just knew that there was things going on inside, and
Mm-hmm.
we ended up here. And so there they asked me some personal questions, and that's when I started to realize, like, okay, whoa, they're considering this to be trauma, and I didn't even think about this as
Right.
trauma. And I had to reevaluate just a lot of my life. And that's when I was able to kind of start my healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I didn't outwardly like admit anything, like I didn't outwardly, I wasn't like, oh, they're like, okay, this may be wrong with you. I'm like, no, hell no, no, no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely not. And that was also my first encounter with like AA. And then you hear all these crazy stories in AA, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I was riding a bike and got into my car drunk and killed 10 people. Like, you hear the craziest, most
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
outrageous.
That was a story someone else told, not a story you told. Like, that was
Right.
not your story, just to clarify for your
Yes.
listener.
Yes. And so it just, you hear just these crazy, outlandish stories, and you're like, wow, like alcohol did this to you. And then I started to realize, like, my relationship with alcohol, I had to consider that. At the time, I didn't think it was a problem. I didn't.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, everybody drinks. So if I have a problem, every Marine has a problem. And I was kind of putting it back on
Maybe.
other people and not really evaluating myself in the circumstance, even though it did allow me to start to have some awareness. Um, and then you mentioned that you were kind of having an episode when you were 27 weeks pregnant.
Mhm.
And I was going to say, on top of already having a mental health condition, certain things can kind of exacerbate that. Like, for me, I had a lot of unaddressed mental health issues when I got out of the military. For
Mhm.
me, I look at all the therapy I did in the military kind of like a plunger. Like, they brought it to the surface, and I was aware, but I was not getting the help I needed for that.
Mhm.
So, like, I'm now aware of these words and these terminologies, and what how my behavior, and what, certain triggers, and I have awareness. But now, actually working through those problems and actually getting the help I need, that wasn't necessarily happening. So I transition out, I'm pregnant, and I have my baby, and 3 months later I end up in the psych ward again, in the
Mhm.
civilian psych ward. So this time I think it's like a mix of postpartum depression also, but that
Yeah.
was just a complete downhill spiral, and it'd been happening for months, and I wasn't aware, cuz again, it looks different for, high functioning people, like, and a lot of people around me, I was saying some abnormal things, like the colors are talking to me. And I think that did bring some concern to my friends, like, oh, she came to see me. And she's like, wait a minute. That's alarming. Which colors? Like,
Yeah.
but
What does purple sound like?
yeah. And so it got really bad, and my husband ended up having to call them to come get me. And that was a whole story within itself. But just knowing, I don't want you to feel alone. I had to go through that too. And I'm not sure if, having a child or that could have like added to it. I don't want to
For
say,
sure.
but just overwhelming, emotions, all kinds of stuff, mental health, like it all mixes together. And so,
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, as we would say in AA, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I know, but like literally, thank you for sharing. You said when it comes to high performers, like people don't get it, right? Because we keep going. There's not a space in which we're like, I'm just going to shut down and fall apart. I remember when I was right before I was diagnosed, when I was at American as a student, I went into a professor's office and I was like, I am not doing okay. And I really like to have my nails done. Like, I do them
it's
myself. I
so
don't spend
pretty.
money on them, but like I like to have my nails look nice, right? And I walk into this professor's office and I'm sobbing and I'm like saying, this is how I feel and this is what's going on. And she's like, well, you got an A on your last paper and your nails look great. So like you're still taking care of yourself. And I was like, bitch, please. I'm not gonna stop. Like as a high performer, like I'm not gonna stop just because I don't feel good. And I think there's like aspects of that that are just like innate, like drive. I have so much
Mhm.
drive to succeed and like to
Right.
bring my ideas into the world. Like I have a lot of like I want to make shit happen. And then there's another element of like worthiness where I'm like I want to show people that I can like do it, right? This is me, right? And the like little kid in me is still like, I'll show you, mean bullies. And so there's like these different aspects of my personality where I'm like, I am just going to keep going. Even if I'm shutting down and I'm like dying inside, I will continue to be like a peak performer. And so
Right.
for like folks that love us and colleagues and whatnot, like it can be very difficult for them to look from the outside and be like, hey, I can see that you're in trouble, although the colors
Right.
talking probably did it. Um, like like I am
That
for
was the
me,
one.
what?
I said, "No, that was the one," and I was
Oh
in the
yeah.
hospital a
Yeah.
couple days later, so
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I mean, but to some extent, it's like nice that there's like that hard of a tell because it does like set people's alarms off in a different way than just saying like I'm
Mhm.
really struggling and I don't feel good, and people looking back and being like, well, you're getting A's and your nails look nice, so you must be fine. For me, like when I was pregnant, I can't take hormonal birth control. Like it makes me loopy, it interacts with my drug, like my medications. Like I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. I don't take hormonal birth control and I haven't for like 15 years. And when I was pregnant, like the progesterone, right, like goes up and up and up and up and up, and birth control pills are made of progesterone. And
Mm.
so when I was like crying on the floor of my bathroom, like on a pretty regular basis. I just like couldn't stop sobbing and just like, I just couldn't stop crying. And I remember calling one of my best friends and I was like, what do you think I'm doing? She's like, I think you're on the floor of your bathroom crying. I was like, yep, I am. And we like Googled how much progesterone like in your body at 27 weeks pregnant, like what's the equivalent of the birth control pill? And it was like thousands and thousands of birth control pills. And in that moment, that was my like colors are talking, like threshold moment where I was like, whoa, this is not just me like having a hard time and like
Yeah.
adjusting to like impending motherhood. This is like these medication, like these hormonal based birth controls that make me
You
wacko.
look,
Right.
you
It was
I wish
enough
I
for
could
me to
bring
go like,
my husband.
I'm in danger. Like, I'm in danger.
I wanna tell you, I wish I could bring my husband in because that was something that was controversial when I ended up in the psych ward the second time because I had the Mirena, and when I tell
Mhm.
you, every birth control, like I feel like I used to sound crazy, but now hearing it from you, I'm like, okay, maybe I wasn't crazy. I
No.
felt that boost. Like I felt differently on them. Like I felt like it exacerbated or like mentally moods. Like it was a lot. Like and I could feel it. And when I ended up there, it was that thing. I think it took me over the top, and
Mhm.
so I definitely want to second everything you're saying in terms of birth control because I do think that the extra hormones on top of already having things going on is just not good for you. And
Yeah.
so,
Well,
and
I think
and
this
that's been
goes,
one of my adjustments. I actually just got mine out of my arm, and I was gonna go back on the patches, but I was like, I want my body to just kind of cleanse, and I did hit like a low point, but I worked through that and I feel like I have a lot more control over myself, if that makes sense.
100%. I vividly remember coming off of birth control and like in that initial 2 week period saying to my son's dad, we were like on a walk, we were on vacation. And I said, I feel like I can like see and feel things differently. And I'd been on these medications, right? I was like mid early 30s, I guess. And I'd been on these medications since I was 15 years old. And no one had said to me, hey, boo boo, this could screw with your moods, right? And I think it goes back to this kind of like we're still living in a vacuum in terms of being really candid with people, especially in the medical community, being really candid with patients and saying, hey, this, whatever I'm about to prescribe you that is not a mood thing, is going to have an impact on your moods. Like I know when when both of my parents take steroids, like for an allergic reaction,
Hmm.
oh girl, like hold
Oh,
the all my mom, my dad, me, we all go nuts. And so when my son my son had a allergic reaction a couple of weeks ago, I took him to urgent care and they were like, this is really serious and we need to give him steroid. And I was like, which one? Tell me, right? And they like gave him a smaller dose, but they at no point did a doctor say to me, hey, did your family have any challenges with these kinds of medications? I was the one that had proactive, like I needed to proactively say,
wow.
like, hey, this might affect my kid's mood.
Right.
Like, what do we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen? And so I think that like one of the areas of advocacy for leaders who want to be part of this conversation is to say to the medical community, like, hey, you need to be more clear about side effects, not just of medications that are for moods, but medications that could interact with moods.
Wow. Yeah. 100%. I definitely agree with that. Yes. Because I didn't even, I'm finding out today that about birth controls. But I always suspected just from my personal experience and how my body interacts with this thing. And I just thought, okay, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just an oddball. Like I would literally tell my husband, like, I feel a difference in my mood, in all of that. And so, and that always sounds like borderline crazy when you tell people like, oh, I could feel it working, like. But
I mean, I don't think that's crazy. Like I think it's important that people say that, especially like we have so much resources, elite research about how women get shut down and overlooked and minimized and gaslit in medical conversations. And so being clear with your provider and being like, hey, I have a mood condition,
mhm,
is this X thing going to possibly interact, right? And that's like unfortunately going to have to be something that you proactively bring up. A provider is probably not going to say it to you, right? And
right.
like even I'm perimenopausal, hooray for me, right? And like having to have those conversations with my providers about like these are the things that I'm up for trying, and these are the things that like snake oil and stay away from, like I'm not interested. That's been like a journey, if you will, of kind of like making sure
Trial
that
and
I'm
error.
heard. But yeah, so if the birth control thing is like something that people are struggling for, like go look into Paragard. I have a lot of good things to say about, and you can email me. We're just at psychedpod@gmail.com should you want some offline conversation about that. But I'm wondering if we kind of draw this to a close,
Mhm.
Dr. Watts, what is on your 2026 wish list for these types of conversations and advocacy and changes in the mental health and leadership space?
um I would definitely say I would like to see leaders actually walk it like they talk it. And
Mhm.
so get in the field, actually do these things, and don't make it a check in the box. Like if you see someone struggling, say something, hand them the resources. And sometimes it's not enough to just do that. Sometimes you actually have to be human and have a conversation and, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And if they tell you and they open up, actually kind of help them through that, because you could be the difference in
Mhm.
life and death, very literally, for some people. So just kind of, I just definitely would like to see a lot more people mean mean it when they say like,
Mhm.
oh, you can talk to me, or you can open up about this, or hey, I have an open door policy, or whatever that is, or whatever that looks like. I just would like to see people, be genuine and mean those things, and kind of destigmatize everything. Like, don't, if you hear somebody having, whatever medical diagnosis, you don't just kind of jump into judgment, or fear, like, oh wait, well, what's going on, or just just kind of work with it and understand that that person's not broken. They don't perform any less. Their performance is
Yeah.
still going to be chef's kiss. But when they need a helping hand, they need a helping hand, and just be that person to be able to do that. How about you? What would you like to see change in this field, or you know, for 2026?
Okay. Hmm. I have like 18 answers, but I'm gonna go. I think the big one is like you say, like um recognizing that someone's performance is not going to change just because they have a diagnosis. And I think that that makes space for people to be open about their diagnoses. So if you are a leader, right, you own a company, you have people working with you, you have colleagues, right, you're at conferences, you're doing all the things that we do to lead companies. Like, be aware of the fact that many people around you are in leadership living with mental health conditions, and noticing that, like, hey, all of us are like fucking killing it out here. And I think the more that we can create conversations around it's normal to have medical conditions that affect your brain, like the more that we can say, like, this is a medical condition. I hate like mental health, like your brain is part of your body. It's like, this is a medical condition.
Yeah.
So as leaders moving around the world, being aware of the fact that like people have medical conditions that affect their mood, and that doesn't change that they're incredible in their job. And I think that then creates opportunities and creates safety. I think safety is the biggest word. It creates safety for people to be open about the fact that they have medical conditions that affect their moods, right? Like, I
Right.
had to feel a certain level of safety before I could start to say that I have bipolar 1. And to be honest, it still like gives me a little bit of like, what are people
Yeah.
gonna say? Right. And there's things that you're more comfortable being open about than me, and vice versa. Right. And like,
Right.
I think that speaks to the fact that like different people feel safe in different ways in terms of disclosing, but this shouldn't be something like, coming out of the closet, right? That where
Yeah.
it's dangerous. Like, coming out of the closet shouldn't be dangerous. And we've had to have spaces and conversations and lots of public advocacy to say there's nothing wrong with someone if they have, if their sexual orientation is different than most other people, right? And to some extent, like, it is coming out of the closet to say, I'm bipolar 1. And I say this having come out the closet when I was 36. Like, it's difficult to speak up and say, there is a thing about me that might make you think less about me. And I think my big wish for this year is that you and I contribute to pushing an agenda that says it's safe to speak up when there's something that's significantly different about you because of a medical condition. And that's just kind of like, that's what I want more than anything. I want to piggyback on what you said though about friends, and being available and all of that.
Mhm.
I have a couple of friends that came to me when I was in the midst of a very significant manic episode, and they said, we're worried about you.
Mhm.
You did this thing and it made me scared. And at the time it felt very persecutory. And
Mhm.
so I mean, they were totally right. They were 100% right, but I
Mhm.
couldn't hear it because of where I was.
Yeah.
And so if you have a friend who's right, if you have a friend or a family member who's going through something and you're watching it from the outside and you're like, I don't know about this, I think the gentle way to approach them that's probably going to get you further than saying, I see you doing this, is simply saying, I love you a lot and I'm here for you. Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Because laying out that invitation is a different level of safety than saying, you're doing something and I'm worried about it. And I think for a lot
Yeah.
of people who don't live with a medical condition like this, a lot of people can look at that and say, well, that's enabling, or you have to call
Mhm.
people out. And what I want you to understand is, like, you're calling someone out for a medical condition, not for a set of behaviors. um, are there medical conditions that lead to behaviors? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Of course, people who are manic are making decisions that are wildly irrational and things like that. But the underlying reason they're doing that is because they have a medical condition. And so when you approach a friend, when you approach a loved one and you say, you're doing this thing and I'm worried, it feels like being called out versus being supported. So
Mhm.
I love you. I'm here for you. Is there anything you want to talk about? It's going to get you a lot further than I see you doing this thing. And in your mind, you're like, I'm calling it out. I'm making sure that I'm not enabling. You're actually pushing that person into a further space of feeling isolated. So heads up.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on for here, our first episode?
I think we hit a lot of juicy points for the first episode. Stay tuned for some more.
Yes, yes, yes. So we will be back soon. You can listen on psychedpod.com. That is just PSYCHED pod.com. And you can email us at psychedpod@gmail.com. On our landing page, you will also see both of our LinkedIn profile links. So you can reach out to either one of us individually should you wish. Anything else, Dr. Watts?
No, not that I could think of, unless I go on another rant about one of these stories.
I love a good rant, but we'll leave there. Okay, Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Happy New Year, guys.
Bye.
Hey, bye bye.